So Chase Irvin, when Spike Lee first came to you and told you the story of BlacKkKlansman, what did you think?
It was, I mean, the story is totally absurd. This black guy joining the KKK. I couldn't believe it when he said it was true. I had to read the script, and I mean, it's just interesting. I thought it was really kind of, it wrote a line in between kind of the absurd and the very dark and racist. So it was, I didn't know what to make of it.
Well, so then what were your first thoughts? I mean, as you say, I mean, it does ride this fine line between being really funny at times, but also it deals with a very serious subject matter. So as a cinematographer, what were your initial thoughts about how you were going to shoot it in order to capture both of these different tones?
Well, I think initially I had a very different interpretation than Spike, and also Spike during kind of our pre-production period. It was really, I mean, we didn't delve too deep into particular cues in the script. It was mostly conversations about the ending of the film, how we could end it, locations, logistics, and that kind of stuff. Because he also plays the role of producer while he's directing. Um, so it wasn't until I kind of was on the set and I was responding to his sense of humor, his writing. They were doing rewrites, they were changing characters' names and stuff like that for legal reasons. Like all these things were kind of pivoting as we were shooting, and I think it works in my approach to cinematography because I very much believe that anything should be possible, and I try not to narrow my POV so much that it inhibits kind of the exploration of what the film could be from within itself, from the actual shooting scenario itself.
Mhm. One of the great qualities about this movie, I mean, it's set in the 1970s, so it really does kind of capture in a lot of ways that look and feel of great movies from the 1970s. How did you guys go about capturing that kind of look?
Well, initially we started looking at some films. I mean, I'm hugely influenced by John Cassavetes and his whole approach to cinema, and just how beautiful all the flaws were in his films. I love that so much. But for Spike and I, our conversations really began with The French Connection, which is a film that has a similar not narrative, but it's a police story. It's about an investigation and that kind of stuff. And in The French Connection, they did a wonderful job embodying and actually generating the spirit of independent filmmaking. And that's kind of what Spike and I wanted to have as well. John Cassavetes also is a pioneer in that regard. But yeah, in French Connection, they were using zooms and they observed their characters from a distance, and they created a lot of tension using these techniques. And I think that was something that I was really drawn to, and exploring kind of what tools we would have on the day, zooms, 35 millimeter film stock, that kind of stuff was all in our arsenal. And you know, honestly, I don't think we knew pre-shooting exactly where we would use all these things, but I think on set intuitively we could respond and we'd have those things available to use for those scenes. So, and that came from support from Panavision and kind of the companies we were collaborating with that were totally on board with the film.
Going off of that, I mean, when you're working with somebody like Spike, who's been at this for a while and has made as many movies as he has, how much planning have you put into, when you go on to the day, like, okay, these are the shots we're going to get. How much planning is there, and how much is there just, you know, responding to what's around you?
It's mostly just responding, but to be honest with you, we when we were scheduling the film, I can't remember, but there was some small scenes that were peppered in the first week that would have been more like dialogue-driven scenes, and I had talked to Spike and the first AD about shooting all of the ending of the film first, which was the big car explosion and all that stuff and that whole sequence, because I felt if we started with that, we could kind of hyper focus on it the last week of production or pre-production. So it really kind of gave us a window to focus on the technical things that weren't necessarily things that we could improvise, obviously, because of stunts and things like that, and fight choreography and all that stuff. So what we did is we storyboarded that scene. We scouted it 7 times, like crazy. We just really figured out how we were going to do that scene, and then we did it in 2 days. I think it was 2 or 3 days. But the rest of the film was actually really fluid and lot of improvisation. Spike would always be on set about an hour before anyone else. As soon as I would arrive, he would have an idea of how the scene was going to go down, and he'd be like, "This is here. This is here. This is what do you think?" You know, we would talk about it, and I would offer my ideas, and we would kind of just go from there. And it was really, I think the collaboration was mostly based off of chemistry and a general aesthetic view. I don't think Spike really wants to get into the debating and talking too much about character and stuff like that. I think he kind of just he trusts the people he hires onto the job, and I mean, we hadn't worked before, so I don't know why he trusted me, but he did. And I think that just comes through conversation and realizing that you both have, ideas that you like from one another, and you just keep it really simple, and that's what we did.
One of the things that's been prevalent throughout his work is this use of color. He uses color in really bold and expressionistic ways, and each film is different in the way it uses color. So I just wonder if you could talk a bit about how you guys used color on this one.
Yeah, I think a lot of the conversations were with Kurt, our production designer, making sure the sets felt the right period, and that always offers a very specific color palette, and we wanted to stay true to that. But I was also referencing a lot of still photography, such as William Eggleston and Stephen Shore, and some of these guys who they have a very specific palette in their still photography of the era too, and how the reds look a particular way, and that goes into even the contrast and how the inky the shadows were back then, and we tried to stay true to that. Other than that, I mean, in terms of like those ideas that Spike has about color, he's very intuitive too, because I think, it was in that hour when he would get in first on the day that he would have all his ideas, and he'd be like, "This is what we're doing." Like he was really bold as soon as you got there on the day. That's how he kind of channels that creative energy, and he gets it out right first thing, and then the rest of the day is all about how are we gonna make this happen and efficiently and stay on schedule and our budget and all that stuff, and respecting the crew, and you know um, making the film, just focusing on the execution. But
Mhm.
yeah.
You
You
mentioned
mentioned
the dinner
the
scene
scene,
but I
but I
wonder,
wonder.
aside from that, was there a particular scene that, maybe you guys had trouble with figuring out, how to film it, and how do you work through those problems?
Yeah, I think I mean, the Kwame Ture speech scene was challenging, but there was a lot of positive energy going into the day. I think we had 100+ extras there, and it's 9 a.m. when you start, and we had all these extras on set, all dressed in wonderful costume design and makeup and hair and all this stuff, and uh, Spike just kind of let things flow. Like the crowd came in and he started playing some 70s music to get everyone into it. And then next thing you know, people were dancing on the stage. And then I'm kind of directing the two other cameramen to start shooting the extras and the people on stage and try to avoid Spike as he's walking around in there too. And then doing portraits in another room of people. And then all of a sudden the speech is happening and we're just like, we're not really stopping, we're just shooting it as if it were an event. And in between shots, if I don't feel like, or takes, I guess, if I don't feel like I got something special on my end, because I was also operating a camera, as well as there was an A and B camera and a C camera, which was mine on that particular day. We were kind of all trying to dance around each other and capture the scene, but I wasn't really sure if we were, doing it the right way or doing it, real way, because it was so improvised. But when that whole scene came together and the way it cuts, I think is just brilliant. And yeah, I don't know how that happened.
I'm glad you brought that one up. It's one of those scenes that really sticks in your mind. And I mean, there is a lot going on there. Those portraits you talk about, it was this really interesting expressionistic kind of thing that you guys did. And I just wonder, like, what the thinking was behind, getting these big close-ups of all these faces in the audience.
I think it came down to the theme of identity that's being expressed in that scene. But on the day, it wasn't necessary. I don't think we knew exactly how it would be portrayed in the edit, but we knew that we didn't want to run around and start just shooting extras in their seats. So we created like a different section, and we would just start taking the background actors and putting them in the scene or in this section and just shooting really elegant portraits of them on a slider. And I tried to match the lighting as best I could, but I didn't. In my mind, it was almost magical realist. It didn't necessarily need to be exactly the same, or it was. It didn't need to be logical, and in the edit, I think he started playing with fading the faces in and having them kind of come out this way. So it was very organic. It wasn't something that we had, the answers to on the day. It was kind of like, like I said, very intuitive. I think Spike is wonderful to work with because he kind of just throws these challenges at you as a cinematographer and you react to it. And I think there's a truth in that, because embedded on the film isn't necessarily an idea that's totally voluntary for me. It's an idea that comes out of my sense of necessity. So I just kind of project it back onto the scene, and all I see are flaws in it because I could have done it better. But I think the spectator absorbs it in a different way, and it feels sincere.
Yeah, it just felt like this really bold and powerful way to visually express what he was talking about with identity and the beauty of Black people and all these other kinds of things. It felt like a really powerful way to show that, and so I was interested by that.
Yeah, it's a I see it as a very romantic sequence, and I think in cinema and in images in America, romanticizing African American life is actually not that common.
Mhm.
And when given the opportunity to do that and express it in a genuine way, I think it becomes really effective and powerful. Um, and I feel like that scene totally embodies that.
Yeah, it's he says it right there in the speech where he's talking about seeing the Tarzan movies, and
Mm-hmm.
and so then to see that juxtaposed with these faces, it really was quite striking.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things you get to do in this movie is you get to do another in the long tradition of Spike Lee dolly shots, um, right there at the very end of the movie. Can you just talk a bit about how you pulled that off?
Yeah, I mean, I've never done one of those before, so I was not totally technically sound on it. But Lamont, our key grip, had been working with Spike since shit, I don't even know when. Probably she's got to have it or something. And he knew how to do it, and Spike knows how to do it. So it was always kind of on the table, but we didn't know where we were going to do it yet. And it was, I think, we were scouting some location, and Spike he always sits in the front of the pass van, and I'm right behind him, and he just turns to me. He says, "I know where we're going to do it. We're going to do it in the hallway at the end." And we hadn't found that location yet. But actually, the apartment where Ron lives is a real location, but the hallway we had to build because we couldn't find the hallway practically. So, to be honest with you, it was kind of um, it was weirdly engineered out of the idea of having that hallway there, because the only thing that was in the script was the camera. Basically, someone knocks on the door, they open the door, and then the camera travels out a window into a cross, and then the film ends. All that other stuff that happens in there, that was ideas that we were having while we were in pre-production or in production already. So when Spike had decided and known where he wanted to do the double dolly, I was so thrilled because I felt like it really kind of finished up what he was trying to say in the end with the screenplay. But in the screenplay, I didn't feel like it was totally there yet because it just ends on a cross, and then it just it wasn't powerful enough, and I think Spike knew that, so he was always kind of rewriting it in his head too. And at one point, I was showing him stills photography of like a KKK rally, and he was like, "We need the end's going to be a KKK rally out the window. We're going to go out the window, and then it's going to go into the KKK rally." And then he was like, "No, it's not going to be a KKK rally. It's going to be a modern day rally." And he, in the end, in the edit, he ended up using both. He goes into the KKK rally, and then that becomes today. And but I felt like the way it was all portrayed was actually very almost. I'll use the same word, magical realist, because as soon as he walks out the door and you're on the double dolly, the I shot that sequence on Ektachrome, and it becomes like instantly aesthetically different, and they're floating and the music's swelling, and it becomes this totally different thing, and you travel out the window, and it almost feels like the whole film was you traveling to this window, and it kind of opens you up for this really emotional ending, which I don't think anybody in the theater expected to have come, unless they read about some of the reviews or uh, comments by others. But it defies expectation, and I think it's really powerful because of that.
Yeah, I saw the movie twice with different audiences, and each time there was stunned silence at the end, to say the
Yeah,
least.
totally.
Yeah.
So even when I was doing the digital intermediate, I was watching the movie over and over and over again, and each time I was crying during that because it's so upsetting to see where we are right now, and when you watch it over and over again, I'm like noticing uh, violence that I didn't necessarily see the first time because it's happening so quickly. Um, but it's really shocking.
Well, it's a truly powerful and important movie, and very well made as well.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Chayse Irvin, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Take care.